Greetings and welcome. This will be the first in a series of several videos that I'm going to produce. My name is Doug. I'm an Oracle DBA. I've been in the industry a little more than 20 years now, and I thought it was time to give back a little. One of the things I noticed is there haven't been consistent linear demonstrations on how to set up VirtualBox and install, let's say, Oracle Enterprise Linux 7, and then install Oracle 18, ASM, single instance, install the database binaries, version 18, go ahead and create a pluggable database, create another container database, move the database between databases, etc. Something consistent. A lot of people have done little components and portions of it, but hopefully if you follow through this entire series, you'll be able to have the exact same installation I have. I intend on reusing some of these environments, so there's consistency. I'm also going to go over the details on the configuration changes you'll be needing to make, like stopping firewalls and turning off SE Linux and installing packages and configuring storage. And this first one will take about 20 minutes, and we'll get to the point where we actually launch the installer. And for the second episode, then I'll go ahead and start where the installer has finished and we complete first boot. So with that said, let's go ahead and in VirtualBox, let you see I'm using VirtualBox version 6. So you're aware, and you can get the same version if you're still on 5. Feel free to upgrade to 6. I haven't had issues with it. So let's go ahead and create a new virtual machine, OEL76, and my name is Doug, so we'll call it OEL76 Doug. Next. Now for the Oracle infrastructure, the installation documentation states that it needs to have at least 8 gigabytes of RAM. So we'll go ahead and make this 8 gigabytes of RAM. And by the way, this is the installation guide, and I'll also post the link to this in the description along with any commands or steps, just to make it easier on you as you're doing it and going through it and following along. You can cut and paste the actual commands. So I'm going to skip creating a virtual disk now. I'm going to create them all together. I'm only going to create 3, and I'll explain exactly how I'm doing that configuration. Of course, there's a warning that says you're creating a VM without storage. It's pretty useless. So, okay, no big deal. So now we're going to go in, and I'll go through each of the settings tabs and show you if I'm changing something and let you know why. So on this first tab for general, I'm changing nothing, accepting all the defaults. On the system tab, I am going to go ahead and increase the processors. I have 16 cores, 32 threads, so I'll give it a little bit of horse. Okay, for display I'm going to change nothing. Storage will revisit. Audio I'm going to change nothing. Network I'm going to go ahead and change this to a bridged adapter. That way we can both get to it from our Windows environment, and our Windows environment and from the VM we can actually get through our Windows environment to the internet at large, so we can get updates. Serial ports, nothing changes. USB, nothing changes. And shared folders, nothing changes. Actually, shared folders, I'm going to go ahead and add one. I'm sorry, that's the wrong one. So I'm going to add a shared folder, and I'm going to call it, I'm going to go to C drive and select my temp folder, and then I'm going to flag that read only, and for a mount point it's going to be C drive _temp, and I'll change that to auto mount in a later episode. So user interface, I'm going to change nothing, so let's go back to storage. First thing I'm going to do, I've got my IDE controller with an empty DVD. I'm going to point that DVD at the Oracle Enterprise Linux 7.6 ISO. Now I'm going to go down to my serial ATA controller, and I'm going to add storage. The first component of storage that I'm going to create is I'm going to create a new disk, and this is going to be for a boot partition. So Oracle OEL76 Doug_boot, and it's only going to be 1 GB, and it's going to be fixed size. Okay, so the next partition I'm going to create is going to be my swap partition. So again, I always change the name of these so I know what they are or were in the event I decide to blow away the VM and leave the disks around in case I want to recycle. So, and this is swap, and I'm going to go ahead and leave that at 12 gig. Actually, you know what? I'm going to change it to 16 gig just for good luck. And it's going to be fixed size. Again, I don't care for the dynamically allocated. When it has to grow, or if the file system does have to grow, that thin provisioning slows everything down while it's making calls out to the parent container to improve on that. So, and interestingly, you saw this jump up to 25%. That has to do with caching. I'm actually using very slow serial ATA 1.3 terabyte disks for my virtual disks for this. My actual boot drive is a 512 SSD, so it's considerably slower than SSDs, but this will be running for a bit and we'll project fast forward. So you can see we did a project fast forward here and we're just about done. Cool deal. Now we only need our root. And same thing. Rename it. And I'm going to make this a 32 gig partition and fixed size. And again, this one is going to take probably about 6 to 8 minutes to create because of the slower storage. So we'll go ahead and project fast forward. My, how time flies. So we're just about done with this, and once it's completed, we'll go ahead and hit OK to commit these changes, and then we should be ready to fire it up. So we've got 3, we've got our roots 32, swap is 16, boot is 1, we've got our ISO, we adjusted our network. So let's go ahead and OK that and start it up. So here we are in the initial splash screen, and obviously we're going to install Oracle Linux 76, excuse me. Now it'll take a minute for this to actually fire up as it's doing its thing. So a couple of things I did want to make you aware of. Down at the bottom of this window we have a couple of icons, and those are useful to show you activity. Here you can see it reading the CD-ROM, and it's obviously loading it into memory. Very little disk activity right now, but we can see the reads and writes, we can see the network. So keep that in mind. And now it's getting ready to start the graphical installer. And we have a mouse has appeared, and here we are. So being English in the United States, I'm going to accept those values and hit continue. Now for date and time, I'm in Arizona, so I'm going to go ahead and go into date and time. and I'm going to change to Phoenix. Nice and simple. And then done. Okay, software selection. Now it's set for a minimal install, but we're actually going to, because this is a non-production test box without standards, we're going to use the server with GUI. Just makes it easier to do a lot of the install stuff we're going to do later. Having a browser available on the system, etc. So once I hit done, it begins to check dependencies. Now the system is quite sluggish. The installer seems to be quite sluggish while it goes through this operation. So I'm just actually going to wait for it to finish before I move on. Okay, so it actually finished. So the only thing we have to do is the no disks, but there's a couple of things I typically like to do, and one is disable kdump, and the other is configure the network. So, as most Oracle DBAs know, Oracle database software is recommended to have a static IP address and not DHCP IP address. So we'll go ahead and first update the host name, and we can run with local domain, that's fine. And we'll turn the network adapter on. It'll take a second to read the configuration, get an IP address, and there it is. But we actually don't want that one. We're going to configure it. So here in the configuration, it's a device name. We usually leave that alone. Okay, so we'll go ahead and tab over to IPv4 settings, change it to manual, add, and I'm going to use 192.168.0.162. Netmask can be expressed either way as far as the bits or with the 4 octets. And of course the default gateway, I'm going to put in the default gateway of my router. And that's pretty much all that's required here. So double check all the numbers, make sure they're accurate, and save. Okay, it'll think a minute, and now it's got its IPv6 addresses as well. Those are DHCP'd still, and that's fine. So now we hit done, and the final thing we have is the storage configuration. This tends to be a little bit persnickety, especially for me. I like to do everything manual so I completely control and own. So I select all 3 of the disks, and I say I will configure. And even though I say I will configure, it really wants to do it for me. So I can click here automatically. But I'm not going to. So first I'm going to start with my mount point, and I'm going to select the boot mount point. And that boot mount point is 1024 or 1 gig. I'm just going to set it at 1020 meg. And it knows that the boot mount point has to be a standard partition. It cannot be a logical volume in a volume group, because it has to boot before it loads all those drivers. So now I'm going to tell it to only use disk A. And we're good there. Next I'm going to add a new mount point. This next mount point I will add is the swap. Swap is going to be 12 gig. Actually, I'm going to change, or let me see. Oh, I think I changed it to 16. Oh. We're going to change that to G. And we're actually going to change this and tell it only use that disk, and then go back to LVM rather than that volume group, we'll create its own volume group, and that's fine. As large as possible. Save. And it's got to think about it. Right now it still says 16 MIB, 16 megabytes, and now it says 16 gig, so we're golden. So the last thing we need to do is add our root partition. So we'll go ahead and select root, and again, rather than going with the full 32 gig, I'm going to say 30 gig. I'm going to say add mount point, and it failed to add that new device. So apparently it's trying to add as a standard partition. So let's revert and do everything again real quick. This time I think we'll go from largest to smallest and see. The software, the installer, does try and do just a little bit too much and prevent you. So modify, change to that, change to that, change that to 30. Now we'll go to LVM, modify, as large as possible, save, it likes that. Okay, so next we'll do our swap, and again we'll go 16 gig, and again it changed it down to 2 gig. Wasn't what we asked, so we'll go to standard. Yeah. And see, it thinks it's using that one because it's the same group. So now we're going to go to LVM, and now we're going to create a new volume group, and this will be for the swap. That as large as possible. Save. And let's 16128 meg. That's less than 16384. So let's click off of it and see if it likes it. 15.75 gig and a 30 gig. Wonderful. So now we have just the last mount point is our boot. Desired capacity 1020 meg. We're going to add that, and again it knows it's a standard partition, and we're going to tell it only there, and 1020. So there we have it. We're all set. Just about a 16 gig swap, a 30 gig root, and a 1 gig boot. So done. So this is all the details it's going to do for the customization changes, etc. So we'll go ahead and accept those, and we're ready to begin the installation. Now as we get to this next screen, it does its preparing to install and does this set up the initial environments, creating the file systems, etc. It seems to be a little bit sluggish, even though it says starting the root password is not set. We're going to be able to click on that, but I usually wait until it actually starts installing packages, because right now it's evaluating all the work it's about to do and looking at that entire list of 1,300 plus packages and defining the order in which it's going to do it. So it's actually taking a fair amount of resource. So we're just going to pause here and wait for it to finish and start installing packages. Okay, so it started installing packages, so we'll go ahead and set the root password. Also, during that preparing for installation process, don't be surprised if this icon hangs without moving for a few minutes. Depending on your system, it might hang a little bit longer. Alright, so being a private system, I usually choose a super easy root password. Again, it yells at me that it's too short. You have to press done twice to confirm it. So I'll do that, and then I will create myself a user ID. And I'll accept that user ID. I'll make myself an administrator, and I will also give myself a super easy password. And again, it'll tell me press done twice to confirm. There we go. So with that, I'm going to wrap this one up. I'm going to start the next video with, as soon as all of this is finished, it's completed the post-installation process and is telling me to reboot. So thanks for tuning in, and hope to see you again.